But I'm now going to pass it back off to Alan to talk about something near and dear to your hearts, regional servers.
Hi again. So, first off, we've heard a lot of comments from the community. We know you guys are very passionate and that people are very excited to play on local game servers. So very early on in the development process, we immediately said, okay, look, we want to set up servers in a lot of these regions where we have a very passionate player base. And so we did. We set up a game server in Sydney, right where we are right now, Sydney, Australia. We have game servers for Heroes of the Storm. But we started getting some feedback, okay, that's cool, you guys did that, but why am I still getting put on these other game servers elsewhere? You know, sometimes I have a great experience when I'm on the Sydney game server, but sometimes I get put elsewhere and I don't have as good of an experience. So I wanted to just kind of quickly walk you guys through exactly how the system works, how the layout is, why we're doing the thing we're doing, and then the improvements that we want to make to keep making the experience better for you guys. How this thing works, we basically have this concept of BattleNet login regions, and we have game servers. So the BattleNet login region is basically that pull down that you select in the BattleNet app when you pick either Americas or Europe or whatever. That's the BattleNet region you're logging into. For every single one of those login regions, there's a whole bunch of game sites, and we basically put these all over the world because a game like Heroes, it's very important to have low network latency. And so we want to get that game site as close as possible to all of our most passionate players. So for example, for the Americas login region, the game sites are in the United States. We've actually got a couple, both West and East. We've got one in Brazil, we've got one in Singapore, and we've got one in Australia here for all of the Australian New Zealand players. So, now, why is it that sometimes I get put on the right game server and other times it's maybe not the best game server for me? This all plays into how the matchmaker works and population. So how the matchmaker works, I'm just going to go through a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to really go into detail here, but there are a lot of factors that go into matchmaking. Things like what game mode you select, your personal skill, you might have heard this as being called MMR, your party size and who's in your party, your hero selection and the team composition within your party, veterancy, basically how many games have you played, your wait time, how long you've been waiting, and then finally your latency, the ping, that's also known as. And these are just some of the factors. There's a lot of other stuff that goes into matchmaking. And it's actually, matchmaking is one of these interesting things that honestly, I don't think we're ever going to say, okay, we're done with matchmaking. I think this is something that we're going to continue to evolve. We're going to continue to improve. And we've already made a lot of progress, but we're not done. We're going to keep on going. We're going to keep making it better. But let's talk about how latency plays into this whole matchmaking thing and why you end up where you end up. Basically, when you go into Heroes of the Storm, your game client's going to ping out all of the game servers for your login region. And it's going to pass that data up to the matchmaker. That data is going to be used, like we just mentioned, with all those other factors, and it's going to try to find what is the best place for you to work in, or to play in. So the thing is, we also have to take into effect the latency of the other party members. So if you party up with other people all from Australia or New Zealand, great, no problem, we're going to find you a good game close by. If you actually end up partying up with people in another region, now we have a bigger problem. We got to figure out what is the best game site for all the people in that party. And it might turn out that the local game site for you is not that best site. It might be that the majority of people are elsewhere, and so we end up putting them elsewhere. So that's another factor to just consider. The final thing to say here, or the most important thing to say, is that this entire thing, there's a balancing act going on. It's truly about trying to find you the best evenly matched game in a reasonable amount of time that is the best performing game we can get. So we really want to get the most responsive game, but we also want to get an evenly matched game, and we want to do it in a reasonable amount of time. And so, like I said earlier, population plays a huge part of this. If we don't have enough people, then it's difficult for us to actually hit all three of those things. And up until now, we've been in closed beta. And so unfortunately, we haven't had as many people. But we've now moved into open beta, and now here we are at launch, and we've actually increased our population steadily over all of these events, and it's going to keep on growing even from here. So, the final thing I want to say is that this tuning really is defined by this maximum latency setting we have, where we can kind of say, we can tune this number, and we can say, look, anything above this number, we don't consider it a very good game. We don't consider it a playable game. We don't want the matchmaker to consider it. Anything below that number, these are probably a reasonable game. And we've kind of done some testing on this, and we figured out what is the latency that's reasonable. Now, in reality, if you have 0 latency, that's going to be a fantastic game. And if you go higher, it's still playable, but you still start feeling it as it goes up. So it's a bit of a balancing act there. You try to figure out what's the right number. So, just wanted to throw up a couple of numbers here. This was before we got on the plane and flew over here. So this was like a week ago, or I don't know, we did some time travel getting here, so this could have been a month ago, I don't know. But when we actually looked at the data before we got here, these are for players who are either from Australia or New Zealand, so players from those countries. Which game site they ultimately get placed on, and what's their average latency. So in this case, we see that for ANZ players, about 87% of those players, when they get into a game, or rather 87% of those games, end up getting placed in the Sydney game server. And when they do, they've got an average latency, so this is not even the best latency. Many people have better than this, but this is kind of average. It's 70 milliseconds. In fact, I think that's better than our average back home. Then another 9% end up actually getting matched on the Singapore game site. And in that case, you've got about 120 milliseconds of average latency. It's still playable, it's still actually a pretty decent experience, but it's not as good. Obviously, you'd much prefer to have the Sydney experience. And then finally, the remaining people are actually getting about 200 or more milliseconds of latency, because they're getting placed on game sites either in the United States or Brazil. And this is where we start getting into this is not really a great experience. So, we talked about that tuning. We talked about actually going up to our launch here. So what are we doing to kind of improve this scenario, this situation? The number one thing is we want to tune that latency factor. This is the short-term fix. We've increased our population. We can actually tune that number. And so in fact, right before we got on a plane, we've adjusted that number. So I just looked at the numbers a little while ago, actually yesterday, and with limited data, we've already actually cut in half the amount of people who are going to those other game sites. So the people who are actually going to Sydney game sites has increased a good amount. We're going to keep on looking at the data. We're going to try to make sure that we're still getting you guys even matches, and we're still doing them in a reasonable amount of time, and then we're going to keep tuning that number. We're going to keep tuning it till you get on the good game site. Another thing that's going to come a little bit in the future is we also want to support the custom game scenario, and specifically for esports, where right now custom games, when whoever creates the game, basically the creator of the lobby, implicitly decides what game site they're on. So if you happen to be in Australia, you're going to be placed on the Sydney server. If you're somewhere else, maybe in the SEA area, Southeast Asia area, for Singapore, you might get placed over there. We want to make that more explicit, where there'll actually be a drop-down that you'll select and say, I want to play on this game site for custom games. And we think this will be a huge help for esports scenarios, and just anyone actually wants to play. The other thing is we want to expose that game site in the lobby a little bit, and make it more clear that you're actually playing where you think you are. And finally, we want to actually improve matchmaking as well, which is we want to make that an explicit choice for you guys. Right now, there is that implicit aspect where we try to figure out what is the best game site for you, which has a lot of advantages as well, because we can spin up additional game sites without throwing a million options in the selector for you, and we'll find a great game site for you. But there's times when you just want to go, look, I don't care about your matchmaking, I just want you to put me on the best experience possible, and I know that's Australia. So as a result, you might want to tell the matchmaker to just ignore everything else and put me on this game site. So we are investigating adding this matchmaking region as a selector for both quick match games and ranked games, and ultimately you'll be placed on that game site. So I want to caveat that with saying that there are some ranked play considerations there that we're still working on. We need to figure out exactly how we want to present this experience, because the more game sites we have, that means the more ladders you have, and as a result, that might cause some problems. There's also UI implications, but we're going to keep on working on that. So ultimately, this was just a quick kind of run through of how we do what we do, and why you might end up on a game site that maybe is not the best game site, and that we're improving it. We absolutely recognize that the performance of the game, the latency that you get, is critical to your enjoyment, and we're going to keep on making that better through these things and other things. So let me get Chris to come back up.
Hey, awesome. What do you guys think of that? Is that a good start for us?
Yeah.
All right. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for having us here today. There's more to go. We have Q&A. There's a few things ahead here, but I wanted to just say this is just the beginning of Heroes. You know, we're here, like I said, celebrating the launch and letting the rest of the world know that Heroes is here. It's super fun, and it's been created with our community. But there's a lot more ahead, and there's some exciting announcements coming as soon as this weekend. So stay tuned, and we're going to hand it over here to PJ and get going.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Let's give him another round of applause because Alan DeBerry is actually the technical director. He's come all the way from California to talk to you about regional servers. It's something that I see as community sports manager often in the forums, and I love to express myself sometimes, but this is the guy who can actually make things happen. So it's so awesome to have him down here. I would like to talk about esports. All right, so before I kick off the esports, EU team actually made a really kick-ass trailer, so let's get hyped. Heroes of the Storm, the World Championship Series, and we'll be going to BlizzCon with that. We also mentioned that Australia and New Zealand was part of that. I'm really pleased to announce the details of how it's going to work out for this region. It actually starts this month. Alright, so we're kicking to open qualifiers straight away. So June the 20th, which may or may not be my birthday, is the top 4 teams go through. We also have another qualifier on July the 25th. Another top 4 teams will go through. Basically, if your team doesn't make it through in the first one, you're very free to go on to the next one. I'd just like to also say that these are managed by our friends Exile 5. These guys have been doing amazing since, I think, January, February, been doing monthly tournaments, so really wanted to support them. They will be managing the open qualifiers, so I'd like to say thank you to Happy Rage and Dot. So basically, both qualifiers are best of 3 if you're in the upper bracket, and they go down to best of 1 for lower bracket. Entry is free, so it's a good price. Sign-ups will actually close a week beforehand, so make sure you get your teams ready. The top 8 teams then go to the ANZ Finals on August the 1st. So this will actually be managed by our friends at ACL Pro. Is Nick Banzi, Brad Baldwin here? You guys rock. So it will actually be cast from their studio live in Sydney. So basically all teams will play from their respective cities. The game rules are 1 ban per team and then first in, first served draft rules. Representing the region is cool, but let's talk money. Esports money. Let's do 25,000 USD. It's actually 32,000 AUD. I went to the site today and made sure. So it's a lot more Australian money. Maybe I should live with Australia. So basically, the top team will get $10,000 USD. It'll be flown to the US, flights, accommodation, and sent over to the Americas Championship. So basically, that's the top 8 players. Top 2 go to BlizzCon. So I actually think we actually have a realistic shot of Australian or a New Zealand team going through. So how do you get involved? And sign up start now. Go to Heroes 2015.aclpro.com.au. It has everything you ever need. It has sign-ups. It has all the details, all the Q&As, F&As, FAQs, whatever you want. So it's all there. We're going to post, obviously, details on Facebook and Twitter after this event, but you heard it here first. So that is esports. You guys hyped? Right, I want your team in then. Okay, so now we're going to change gears a little. We're going to get Chris and Alan back onto the stage. We're going to maybe just chat to them a little bit, find out a bit more details, and then we're going to cross it over to you guys for your Q&A.
ANZ in the finals at BlizzCon, all right? Can we make it happen? The team is here in the room, right?
Why not?
Let's see it. Let's make it happen.
We're in this room right now, and the winning team is here. All right, guys, thank you for coming down. I know it's a long trip. You guys have been in Blizzard for a while. Can you guys just let everyone know how long you've been with Blizzard and where you actually started?
Sure, yeah, I'll kick it off, I guess. I've been with Blizzard for a little over 19 years at this point. And a little bit of my story is just that I started in quality assurance, and at the time it was a very different time in the world. I was actually on a scholarship at a university in Southern California, knew somebody that knew somebody, and cold called an artist there and said, "You guys need help with anything?" Like testing, like, "Can you come in this Saturday?" "Yeah, I'll come in this Saturday." And there I was testing for $7 an hour at the time, and wow! And then I look back across 19 years, and my whole world changed right then. But yeah, it goes back quite a ways.
Yeah, so I've been at the company about 18 years now. I started kind of a similar way to Chris in that at the time I was working at UPS, the package company, and my brother who was working at the company, he said, "Hey, I started at this game company. Do you want to come help them set up their computers and network?" And I said, "Sure." That beats moving packages into a car all day long. So he got me that job. I started immediately, and I was basically the IT department. Took care of all the computers and network and stuff. And then at the time we were about 25 people or so, and really we wore a lot of hats. We did a lot of things. So I also helped out with customer service and QA and maybe even answering phones at some point. So, and then over time I was still going to school at the time, going to school for computer science, and finally graduated from that and started going into engineering. And the first kind of game that I actually programmed on was Warcraft 3.
Who's a big Warcraft fan here? We've got a few.
That was my first game production job as well with Alan at that point. So.
Wow. Cool.
War 3 is near and dear to our hearts as well.
Warcraft 4.
Thanks, guys.
Warcraft 4!
Well, we're about to announce
Half-Life 3
We'll leave it
confirmed.
there then. It's fine. So you guys are obviously in different roles now. So let us know about your roles and what a typical day is.
Sure. So as executive producer, I'm actually the executive producer at this point on, talk about wearing multiple hats, on Heroes, StarCraft 2, and Esports for Blizzard at this point. And I think as soon as possible, they want to take as much of that away from me as they can, but I'm the guy right now. So what does that mean? As executive producer, it's really my job to be working with the team leadership and ensuring they have what they need. Are they asking the right questions for themselves? What challenges are they facing, and how can we make sure they have those things, whether it's monetary resources, people resources, etc. And so this is newer. But prior to this, I was the production director on both Heroes and StarCraft 2. So I have close relationships with people like Dustin and Sammy and the different leaders that have been making these games for a long time, and I'm trying my best to really get them what they need, channel what they need to be successful at the games they're working on.
So I actually just recently transitioned into technical director position. Originally I was a lead software engineer, and I was focused on the UI team and on the online team, so basically all of our integration with the Battle.net service as well. And in that capacity I was directly working on the game and actually coding things relating to both the UI and the servers. Recently kind of moved over to technical director, and my job there, I was going to say it's basically looking at email all day, but actually I'm working with all of the engineering sub-team leads as well now, and trying to make sure that they have everything they need to succeed. So there's a lot of overarching technical decisions that we need to make sure we're all on the same page, and that we're heading towards a common goal. So at this point, really, I'm just trying to do whatever I can to make sure everyone else has what they need to make sure we can deliver all the cool stuff for you guys.
So some of you may actually recognize these guys because we have a drummer and we have a lead, we got it, a lead guitarist for ETC, Elite Tour in Chieftain, the Brisbane band. Tell us how you got involved in this band, come on.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if we've ever really talked about this too much, but so we made this game called Warcraft 3 or whatever back in the day. I'm kidding. And while we were working on the expansion of Warcraft 3, at the time, the lead audio engineer, audio designer said, "Hey, why don't you guys record a song?" And we were playing just for fun on the side with Sammy. One song I think we knew at that point, and tweaked the lyrics. Sammy did his Sammy magic on the lyrics and wrote Power of the Horde, and that was this hidden track that we put on Frozen Throne. We prefer to think of it that our awesome album, Power of the Horde, that launched there, had this small demo.
Came with a free game.
Yeah, free game called The Frozen Throne, and that was really our song that made it so successful, but we realized that's not the truth, too. But anyway, that's how it all started.
Interesting stories. So a lot of people want to get into game design or game development. Is there any tips you can give them?
So first off, don't do it. No, I'm kidding. I think the most important thing, and really when we talk about like Blizzard and a bit of the secret sauce on how we've managed to be successful over all these years, I think something that's super critical, and it's kind of obvious, it goes without saying, but you have to be passionate about the games. You have to be truly a game player. So if you're going into games because you think it's some glamorous job or something, well, first of all, we can tell you right now that's not true. But number two, you really got to care about the games. And so as game players at Blizzard, we kind of know what it is that we like. And so as a result, we end up making what we like and hope that everyone else likes that as well. So going into games, obviously, you got to be a game player. Number two, I think what's pretty important that I always talk to people about is, while I think school is very important, and obviously you should continue to go to school, especially there's a lot of great programs now for game development. I think something that's super important is to do stuff on the side, is to really have side projects and consider what you want to do, because just coming with schoolwork is one thing, but actually, no matter what you do, if you're an engineer or artist or whatever, having those things that you've worked on the side, I think shows definitely that level of engagement, but also that you've worked on real things, like practical things that could be used in a game, where sometimes the schoolwork might be more specialized around a particular project. But that stuff is fantastic as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to there. So Alan described it as passion. I describe it as engagement. And it's important to understand that everybody's got, being engaged, meaning you play games, is great. That's where you form your basis of how you make your opinions on those things. But having an opinion isn't it, just because you have strong opinions and you can back it up with a lot of angry words or whatever is not the important part of it. It's having a perspective on that. And for me, it's that engagement in what it is. While you're looking at it daily, you're understanding it, you're looking at it from many different angles, and not buying into necessarily even your particular viewpoint, but the viewpoint of everybody involved, all the people playing the game. So when the best employees that come to Blizzard are hyper engaged, they're playing and they're open to seeing other views, and that helps us tweak the games in the right way. And then I was just going to add that on the school side, it's really important. It's so much more competitive today. I told the story about starting with this cold calling somebody, and that just doesn't happen today. There's so many, every university has a program today, and it's tough. So how do you stand apart? And I totally agree with what Alan's saying, is work on something, show your passion, be engaged in that thing, and that gives you that leverage up to get involved in that. And then I was just gonna really quick, QA. I came through QA. We still hire a lot of people onto the teams through our quality assurance department. It's a great place to understand game development. You start to understand how, what the programmers are doing, what a build is, how it all kind of ties together and gives you this great basis. So if you are interested in getting into games, get engaged in it and start working in it if you can.
Just one last quick thing. On the making your own projects, there's so many great tools out there now. Number one, you've got the StarCraft 2 editor, obviously, but then Unity, these other kind of tools for making little games. There's so many tools that we didn't really have initially, so go explore those things and mess around with them and make cool stuff.
Cool. So we're talking about games. Tell us about your favorite non-Blizzard game.
Wow, you have to pick a non-Blizzard game. Well, I think I told you the story, but one of my favorite experiences playing games goes back to really Star Wars. I am a total Star Wars geek, the original stuff, okay? That stuff. And I feel like it defined me as a human being to some degree. I became the geek and science fiction nerd that I am today as a result of Star Wars. So one of my favorite moments from gaming was actually in Dark Forces. And because it just does not compare to the games that are out today. But there was a moment in this game, everybody really cites Doom as the shooter of choice and what really influenced them. And it was amazing and great too at the time. But Dark Forces, what its tie into Star Wars, there's a particular moment that I remember from it where you're down in this Dark Trooper development lab, and it's deep in the heart of it. And you run down there, and your partner Jan Ors is up above, and she radios down to you, and it's like, Kyle, there's something going, and the radio cuts out. And I remember having this total visceral reaction to it, and like, oh my God, I gotta save her, and I'm running back through this level I've just spent an hour and a half playing through or whatever, And I don't want to ruin the story for all you. We're going to go back and get there, but
She
Boba
does.
Fett's there. No, she doesn't. Boba Fett's there and he kicks your ass. And he kicked my ass at least. And it was like such an amazing moment. And it was story driven, exciting, got my heart pounding, and it's one of those just awesome moments. So.
Yeah, for me, I think it was, there's a ton of games, but probably the defining one was actually Ultima 7. I used to love the Ultima games. Ultima 7, now I'm going a little bit old school, but it was a fantastic game. Like it was, because we're huge D&D nerds, we love playing role-playing games, but that game was
Still
like...
play almost every
Yeah,
weekend,
actually, we played right before we came here. It had this like aspect, this open world aspect, really exploration. You could almost, it's like an MMO, single player MMO before there were MMOs, where you could like bake bread and do all this crazy stuff that had nothing to do with the game. So
That's important.
That's actually why I loved it, the bread.
You do that on mobile now.
Yeah. But overall, it was just an awesome game. I would often go back and play it over and over again over the years, and I'm sure now it won't even run. But.